happens when you balance your finances, career, and your well-being? There's no limit to what you can achieve. This is Finance, Fitness, and Finesse, a dimensional wealth podcast hosted by JaeVic, where building wealth with wellness isn't just a goal, it's a way to live intentionally. In a world flooded with information overload and misleading highlight reels, F3 is your podcast to help you realize you're not woke, you're broke, and how to change that in your favor. If you're looking to elevate your wealth, well-being, and discover the power of balance, tune in to learn why money matters, but wellness counts.
When push comes to shove, financial skills are survival skills. So how do you hone in on that and make sure you're surviving as a team?
Hey, Finessers! Welcome to another episode of Finance, Fitness, and Finesse, where we build your wealth with wellness 5 reps at a time. I'm your host, JaeVic, and you're not woke, you're broke if you don't lock into this episode where industry experts share their insights on building wealth, managing stress, and living a balanced life. Before we get started, help your lifelong learner community grow by leaving a rate and review for the show on the homepage, or share this episode with someone you care about. And if you're looking for key resources and interactives to deepen your journey, head over to JaeVic.com. In this episode of F3, I sit down with Ashley Agnew, a certified financial therapist, senior wealth advisor, and director of financial wellness. Ashley brings a dynamic blend of financial advisory and therapeutic insights, guiding clients through not just the numbers, but the emotions and values that live beneath them. Her focus is on long-term care, intergenerational planning, and making sure wealth is aligned with what matters most. Whether it's building emotional intelligence into your financial plan, organizing your wealth around your values, or creating a money relationship that lasts for generations, this conversation is all about equipping you with the insight and inspiration to grow in both wellness and wealth. All right, let's get into it.
One, two, get down.
Tired of saying, "I'll do it tomorrow," feeling burnt out, overwhelmed, and consumed by decision fatigue? Dimensional Wealth helps turn intentions for a goal into action as you build wealth with wellness 5 reps at a time. In a world that values hustle over healing, momentum matters more than motivation. Through specialized resources, coaching, and intentional programming, Dimensional Wealth helps you take the first step and makes it possible to live a life of your design. It's time to live life on purpose, not autopilot. Design your blueprint for lifestyle fitness and holistic abundance at JaeVic.com. Link in the show notes. Okay, Ashley, well, let's get into it. I'm so thankful to have you on the show. It has been way too long. This has been a show that I've been anticipating very much. And the question that I like to open up with is, what is your first money memory, or a memory when your relationship with money changed?
So it's so interesting because it's something I've reflected a lot on going through just self of the financial therapist work. And I think that my first money memory comes from being super tiny, early elementary days. And I remember making little clay dolls out of this Play-Doh-like substance and trying to sell them to my family members, to my immediate family members. And once they, thought that was cute and started giving me some change for them, I really got the fever for that. And then I started to look around and say, hey, wait a minute, there's some stuff around my room I don't want anymore. And maybe I can, make some money off of this. So I feel like business mindedness was one of my earlier money memories. And then as I go through it, it made me gravitate more towards my family business, right? From my family of origin, my biological parents owned a business together, and just thinking about that and some of the arguments that they had around that and the celebrations they had around it. So it seems like a lot of my money memories are very business focused, which is interesting on how my career developed following that, just looking back in hindsight.
You were a little hustler. I love that. I'm jealous. I wish I had that mindset as a kid. It's super cool to hear that because it sounds like you were definitely a sponge as you also, and very observant as a kid, taking in, the different ways that your parents took on business. So let's give a little bit of your background, Ashley, because you are the 2024 president of the Financial Therapy Association, which I love and I'm so happy to be a part of. It sounds like you had a pretty cool track in regards to being really innovative with your ideas, and it sounds like you've probably had to be flexible as you've experienced different things. So if you could give some cliff notes of that little tiny entrepreneur, that lady hustler that grew up and moved into the finance and financial therapy space, how would you describe that journey up to this point?
A winding road for sure. And I know that I'm going to totally butcher this reference, but there's some, Buddhist story where the monk is trying to find the temple at the top of a mountain and he hits all of these twists and turns and never thinks he's going to get there and is going round and round. And once he finally gets to the top and looks backward, the road is a complete straight line. And I never thought I'd end up where I am now, but it all sort of makes sense, right? When we're building through that money story. So I actually started off, because I loved business and people and relationships, I started off in marketing, right? And I love teams. So I went to the first place that offered me a sports scholarship. So whether or not that's the best collegiate decision, probably not, but it got me to really evaluate what was important to me and what I was passionate about learning. So I started off in, marketing, went to UMass Dartmouth, transferred, really loved writing, and started off in hospitality, believe it or not, because it got to combine some of the skills that I really liked. And I was running a country club, which was a lot of fun, but really, really trying. So not many people really love working from 9 a.m. to 2 a.m. every day. And as I started to look around, I thought, there really aren't a lot of people over 40 in this position. And as I'm coming up, closer to 30, I was just evaluating a little bit more of that and wanted to do a good job. And it was really hard to do a good job because the person who owned it wasn't a great business person, nor were they transparent. So that didn't allow me to be a good business person, which didn't feel very good. So I knew if I needed to do a good job, I would either need more education, and if I wanted to move on from that position, I would need more education because, to be blunt, when folks hear about a woman running a country club, they're thinking cake tasting, bridal show. Isn't that sweet? Not running a staff of 250 people, working with a difficult business owner, accounts payable, scheduling, all of that, right? I mean, it's optics, but it's the truth. So I went to Bryant University and pursued my MBA. And ended up gravitating towards global finance, which is something I never thought that I would really gravitate towards. But again, hearing about such a lack of females in finance, that made me want to scratch and itch a little bit and say, well, what's wrong with that picture? And the folks that I was in with my cohort couldn't believe that I wasn't taking the marketing track. And they said, well, what, that's what you're so natural. I said, yeah, but I want more, right? I want more out of this, but I didn't really know where my skill set fit in. So I met the owner of Centerpoint Advisors through my sister, who was lovely enough to have an introduction. And I said, hey, Jennifer, can I buy you a cup of coffee as I complete this program, this master's program? If we could just meet up once a month and I could pick your brain. I love numbers. I love crunched numbers. I don't love crunching numbers, but I can. And I love client-facing roles, but I don't know really where that fits in the finance world. And she said, well, I'll do you one better. Come to Centerpoint and talk to all of us. So I thought that was just so gracious, and it completely changed the track of my life because I found out more about the wealth services industry and the non-transactional side of finance. Because when you think about finance as you're going through your education, especially in undergrad, and if you're 50 or going into graduate, you think accounting, taxation, investment management, private equity, but not the whole piece, the holistic planning, right? What I hear you call that I love dimensional wealth, right? All of those pieces that go together. So what I didn't know is that her partner was 12 years her senior and very client facing and looking to retire. And they were looking to backfill that. And she said, you know what? I can teach anyone finance. I can't teach anyone people. and the emotional side of finance. So it was really a blessing to have that introduction. I always say it's the best cup of coffee I ever bought. And as I started working more and more with clients at Centerpoint, the clients always started out reaching out to request a financial question, right? Request the answers to a financial question. Can we have a portfolio review? Can I talk to you about when I should retire? But it always ended up being about so much more, right? And I think that you can tell by my rambles, I like to complete the circle, right? If there's knowledge to be had, I want to dig in. And I think that's, a little bit of a female quality too. So they're coming out of meetings, clients leaving meetings saying in either a really relieved, cathartic way, oh, I feel like I just spoke to a therapist. Or they would say in a really cringy way, oh my goodness, I feel like I just spoke to a therapist. I said too much. I'm so embarrassed. And I was talking to the owners of Centerpoint. I said, there's a need for this. There's a need for a safe space for people to speak openly about money, where they're not going to be judged, but still have the resource to solve their financial problems. And they said, go find it. We'll support you. And I'm just so lucky to be working in a space like that, because then I found the financial therapy certificate program at Kansas State, found the Financial Therapy Association, and just such a welcoming group of professionals who share that philosophy. And we're really able to add value to client families by incorporating financial therapy into financial advisory. And I know that's a long-winded answer, but at the root of it, I'd like to convey that it's not always the first thing you think you're pursuing that you'll end up fueling your passion with.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Let me just say, amen, amen to that, for real.
There's so much pressure put on us, right? When we're trying to choose our professions. And, I just remember that feeling of overwhelm. Like, what am I going to do? Okay, there's what I'm passionate about. And then there's what pays the bills, right? That's a real internal struggle. So when you can combine those things, it's great, but it's not always the first stop.
Yeah. And I mean, let me just say that the assertiveness is screaming right now, because not only the assertiveness of I'm totally with you, seeing that, hey, not a lot of women do this. Let me jump into that. I remember I did that when I got into boxing back in high school. Nice. And even just the assertiveness with, let me just go out and have a cup of coffee with this person, see where it goes, see what opportunities are out there. And that's also creating your own opportunities. I love and admire so much meeting professionals, meeting lifelong learners like you that see a component of a business that they're working in. They don't even have to be the owners of the business. That's a perfect example of you elevating your community, elevating the space that you're working in to help more people, and really being observant of the people that you communicate with. I feel like in today's age, we don't really fully pay attention to the people that we speak to. And you saw the emotional release or the emotional distress that some of the clients you worked with would go through, especially in regards to conversations about their money. There are major stigmas around how it's not a safe topic to discuss with people. If you're not doing it right, quote unquote, then you should be ashamed, or you should be embarrassed or feel guilty. And it's just not addressed enough. So I love that you work to expand the services available so that you can help build dimensional wealth in other people as well.
And there's also a stigma, not just talking about money, but there's also the stigma that you should know everything about it. Why? Right? It's not talked about in homes because our parents didn't have that. Their parents didn't have that. A lot of it's taken out of schools, and not even to the fault of schools, but look how rapid everything is changing, right? Everything's changing so rapidly that, when I was in high school, you were learning how to balance a checkbook. My interns don't even know what a checkbook is. What's the school supposed to do with that? Not much. So my clients find a lot of relief when we first start working together. And I say simply, don't worry, you didn't miss a class and there's not going to be a test. Oh, okay, great. Let's just meet them where they are. And, what are you curious about? And that can be really, really relieving, especially when we have some clients who come in, especially couples and families, who say, the only time we ever talk about money is in your office. And I'll say, well, then you need to come to my office more. And that's okay, because that can be a really respectful way to talk about money, is through a facilitated conversation, at least at first. And that's okay too.
That is so interesting, Ashley, because I'm hearing a lot too about the different dynamics, not only the home dynamic that people may have with their different family members in the home, but with what you shared about your background, it sounds like you have had to overcome some societal stigmas, stereotypes that this is what a woman is when she's a business owner in a certain entity like a country club, or not many women are in the finance space. That's because traditionally our roles are different in the household. So, how do you work with some of your clients when they come and sit down with you and you're noticing some dynamics that could maybe shift towards being more of a team effort rather than one dimensional?
That's a really great question, one I could talk about on a whole hour-long podcast because we run into this a lot. So let me, in a few different ways. First, during life transitions, right? And we're speaking a traditional, heterosexual relationship or coupleship where if a widow goes through the loss of a husband, now all of a sudden she has been living in this world where, okay, I'm the homekeeper. I might use resources to take care of the day to day of the children, but I might not be out there planning for our insurance or an investments or in the workspace, right? But now she's thrown into this. Now she has to do everything. And that can be really overwhelming, right? Or we'll have folks going through divorce where that's another similar, right? Or we have young couples coming to us for premarital financial counseling where that's flip-flopped and they don't know how to handle it. I'm about to marry the love of my life and she makes way more money than I do. I'm okay with it. My family's not okay with it, right? Or I'm okay with it, but I don't think my family's okay with it. How do we balance it out? How do we talk about it, right? So there are a lot of different dynamics that come to it because we all have our own money story, right? We all have our different types of adversities, our perceived adversities, right? And we are thrown into these relationships and we're just supposed to make it work. We have our rose-colored glasses, not our green-colored glasses. But when push comes to shove, financial skills are survival skills. So how do you hone in on that and make sure you're surviving as a team? So we see that a lot in the office and it comes in many different forms.
Financial skills are survival skills, period, on that.
Yes.
One other thing that I know you work with, Ashley, is developing a money mantra, a financial mantra.
People will come with all sorts of different negative self-talk, right? So they're like, well, I'm bad with money. Okay, well, that's not a great mantra. If you go into making a financial decision and that's what you're telling yourself, you're not going to leave that making a confident decision. And you might not be asking the right, if any, questions. So we try to get to something else that you can keep in your pocket that gives a little bit more confidence. So how we get to that is, well, is that statement absolutely true? Is it always true? And can the opposite actually be true? So if somebody comes to me and says, I'm never going to get this, I'm so bad with money. And just using, say, the divorcee example, I'm so bad with money. I've never had to handle this stuff. He always did that or she always did that. I say, okay, well, what I'm hearing from our previous conversations is that all of your kids' after school activities are always paid for on time. You have no credit card debt. You always have a stocked pantry. I heard you say that you're the house that all the friends want to come over. That sounds like you're really good with keeping your family secure. And that's a skill that makes you really good with money. Oh, yeah, I guess you're right. And you say, so when else is that true? So now we can create a new mantra that says, I can be good with money when I keep my family safe, or something like that. That's a little bit more confidence building, right? For example, my personal money mantra is, I am more than my career. I am worth more than making money and paying bills. Because as a people pleaser, as a serial academic, as somebody who's passionate about what I learn, I want to make sure that my family's not getting the scraps of my work life. And that's a financial decision too. So it can come from all different ways, but having something that you can keep to lean on, right? A saying that resonates with you, that you helped create, that didn't come from a fortune cookie, or, God bless you if you did, then you got a great cookie there. But that sometimes it can just be helpful to just name what you need. And sometimes what you need is just a little boost of confidence.
Absolutely. Money mantras are so powerful because, money touches every dimension of our lives. And I love that you are working in such excellent therapeutic techniques and even coping techniques for people, such as disputing your limiting beliefs that you have about yourself. There's a technique that we use a lot at the eating disorder clinic I work at called rational emotive behavior therapy, REBT for short. And the core essence of that is let's dispute a limiting belief. What is something that you believe about yourself that you sometimes work to internalize because of the expectations that society or your environment might have around you? But how can we actually dispute the unknown falsehoods in that statement?
Right.
How can we bring those to light? And so I love that you do that by also just helping your clients reroute their neural pathways and understanding of themselves and what they're capable of. But the biggest thing too, Ashley, which is why it's just so wonderful that you are someone who went to school, not even to initially pursue therapy, but you took that on later. Because I mean, it shows that we can all learn to communicate with others in a certain way to help elevate our lifestyle. But first, we have to communicate with ourselves. And you have these mantras that you make sure that you exercise so that you're present in the other parts of your life. And for me, just listening to what you were saying, I was like, what would my mantra be? And I believe it's the passion that I hope to deliver to others. And that's I build wealth through wellness, meaning I cannot be well with my money unless if I am well in the other parts of my life. So just seeking that balance and adaptability and things like that.
I love that, wealth through wellness. I'm going to sit with that one for a little while. That's so great. And, another thing that I like about using therapeutic modalities within advisory work and just what I've learned through therapy, learned through my own therapy and through, the practice and education of therapy is the power of meeting people where they are cannot be understated. When we're trained as financial advisors, it's problem solving, right? Hey, 2 + 1 is 3. That's it. How do we get there? We add 2 to 1. But the quick fix isn't always the real fix, right? So being able to slow that process down has really helped with how we onboard clients and work with clients. And it's also made me realize, that whole idea of transference, countertransference, and the whole reason of why do kids listen to a professional and not to their parents? Right? Your parents can tell you something a million times, but as parents, it's so easy to project your own stuff onto your kids, right? So how do you take a step back from that? And I don't think you truly can 100% as a parent take a step back from that, but it's nice to know that there's people who are trained to do it and that there's resources out there so that if you're a young adult who feels like, man, like nothing's ever good enough for my parents, or I'm never going to live up to the standard, or, I'm never going to make enough money to cover what I really want to do. If that's not a conversation you want to have with your family, that's fine. There's people out there.
There's so much power in that, Ashley, because it's really hard to go into the roots of understanding of our own psyche, of how and why we interpret things. And it's really unfortunate to meet with some of my clients that are just questioning themselves, like, why am I the way I am? And, one thing, thank goodness that they're sitting with me, a therapist, so that I can validate their experience. I can listen to their perspective from an unbiased point of view so that they can work to develop a grounded level of communication so that when they do want to open up that conversation with their family members, that everybody can elevate and it wouldn't turn into a conflict or, what's wrong with you for choosing a different path. The foundation of a family can be based sometimes on what they understand in regards to their finances. I mean, I have a theory that intergenerational poverty is related to the fact that grandpa knew this much about money, so then this is all he passed on to dad or mom and didn't really communicate about it. And then that lack of communication was then passed on to the grandchildren. And so communication is so powerful, and it's really how we elevate our environment, elevate our lifestyle. But if we can't reach a point of feeling safe with ourselves, of voicing that, then, we're not going to get anywhere. So it is very important to meet with, professionals like you and I to find that voice.
It's true. And, it's that rubber band effect, right? So using your example, okay, so, grandpa shared a little bit, but not enough to dad, and dad didn't share enough, right? Going on. Now you'll have some people in that family chain who might overcompensate, right? So now they're obsessed with it. And then what does their next generation think, right? And how do they react? Maybe they feel too tied or too pressured around money. I always worry about that as a parent. And my daughter's 7 years old. She's super sassy, right? And so she was home during COVID. So she's picking up on things. And one day my husband says, "Hey, do you need this letter for the mortgage?" "The mortgage, that's the house. Is everything okay?" It's like, oh, wow. Like, what messages am I passing on to her? And like, what types of things are just inside of her, right? Like she said to me when she was 5 years old, like brand new 5, she said, "Mommy, if Santa just bought a machine, he wouldn't have to pay all those elves." And so now it's like this awakens my inner child who's selling the little Play-Doh dolls and the stuff from the room. And like, you know what? Maybe this isn't like me projecting on her. This could just be her little capitalist self. So
that's hilarious.
Just like diving in to understand that is always wild. And I'm curious to see as, she grows up, what she'll get out of it. But we do work with a lot of clients who maybe they didn't see the grind of their parents. And so they might expect, some handouts, or they might expect that their parents should maybe be more charitable with their money than they perceive them to be. Well, you have all of this wealth, then why you should be giving X amount away? Well, you're just seeing the wealth. You're not seeing the journey to get there, right? And you're not seeing yourself as part of a family. And we see on the opposite side of the example of intergenerational poverty, intergenerational wealth, if there's trauma there and if there's wounds, then there aren't positive money messages going down that line either. And there can be a lot of friction in the legacy rather than love and continued wealth and continued charitable contributions and desired philanthropy, because it frictions out and fizzles because the communication wasn't there.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely. Most definitely. And I'm really starting to even see that in the eating disorder space, because again, money touches everything. And I have some clients who are struggling with binge eating disorder, and they sneak it. They'll go and they'll spend a lot of money on food, and then it's actually causing strain on the family. But then the binge eating may be happening because of family stressors. And so it's all like this big cycle that feeds into itself. What are some ways that you have worked with some of your clients in fostering a safe space to communicate about money?
So in the advisory space, it can be a little bit different, right? Because of what I said before, where our clients initially are coming to us for wealth management, for investment management, right? So coming forth and saying, well, hi, I'm a financial therapist, might scare people away and not give them a safe space, right? So really communicating with questions like, how do you like to receive information, right? Instead of, does this make sense to you? Which can be really, kind of demeaning, right? If you didn't have to deal with any of this, what do you want your wealth to do for you? What do you want your money to do for you? Or what's the biggest problem in your life that you think money can solve? Okay, we get to that problem. How would you feel if that problem was solved? And now once we have those factors, we can get creative with ways to get to the solution, because it isn't always just 2 + 1 is 3. Sometimes it's 1 + 2 is 3, right? And we can help get to that and foster the safe space. And just by shutting off the screen sometimes, right? I mean, of course, we're in financial advisory land, so we have it prepped, right? We have our proposals, we have all of that. But sometimes by just sliding it away and, saying, what's most important to you, right? Instead of what are your goals, helping through some visualization exercises. And I always say the best retirement tool we have is free because it's visualization, and using that to communicate, because that can really help shape, because you might think that you want a second home, but really what you want is a place where you can connect with your family. Okay, well, we can do that in other ways, right? Well, I really want a nice car. Do you want a nice car, or do you want the status that comes with the nice car? What other ways can we do that? How can we fulfill these needs? But if you just go and fill out a questionnaire that says, what are your needs? What are your goals? That's really cold. That doesn't set the setting for a holistic financial engagement. So that's why we, say financial therapy informed advisory. And, listen, sometimes there's those meetings where we have to act swiftly. And that's too bad sometimes, right? There's an estate issue that has to be resolved within 30 days. Well, we don't have 6 months to dive into it. How can we work collaboratively in that case? And that's another great thing about Centerpoint, the way that our team is formulated, because we work as a full team. So while our director of financial planning is addressing crunching the numbers, we can be working together on opposite things. So letting them know that, hey, it's not my client, Jen's client, John's client. It's the whole team around you, that you have people, that can be really comforting to clients.
That's super helpful, Ashley. It sounds like you guys utilize not only working with the client and addressing that, hey, you are the expert in your life and how you operate. You're not there to tell them what to do. So that's super helpful. And this is me like taking in the advantage of working with people like you, because I'm learning from my future practice. Meet the client where they're at, understand their learning style, help them visualize. And those several different techniques, along with the disputing beliefs, gets to the core root of self-awareness of what is really behind this want versus a need of this purchase. It's not just the materialistic view of something that you want. What else is it? What is it doing for you as a person? What is it doing for your environment, for society, for your identity? And that's a really wonderful way, even as an individual, to really try and internalize what kind of purchases you want to make. Or like you said, even in the media today, oh, Ashley, I have so many peers that scrolling through our phones and, we're seeing like, I got rich in 6 months, doing this, and I got rich doing this, and then all the flashy ways of looking like you're wealthy. And it's really just reinforcing the debt cycle that many of us find ourselves in. And so I really love that, visualize you even having that material thing that you're seeking, and there's nothing wrong with it, but think about what it'll do for you other than just having that in your possession.
Exactly. And there's this whole school of thought right now that there's no such things of wants versus need. Wants are needs, because it's not the want of the thing, it's the want itself, right? So diving into what's behind the want. How do we find other ways to deal with that? And it's funny because when we're talking about limiting beliefs, on the other side of the spectrum, we have worked with people where their limiting belief is that they are good with money and they're not. So how do you bring that full circle? And that's where the wants and needs and desires and, are you looking for status? Are you looking to improve your self-worth? What's going on here? Because there can be some really dangerous cycles. And I've had people come right out and say, no, I want to look like that on social media. That's what I want. Okay, let's peel back the layers of that onion, right? And how do we really, achieve success? Then we get to, how do you define success? How do you define achievement?
Yeah, I've been doing the same thing with some of my clients too. It's very powerful to ask someone, define the word achievement in your life, define the word deserve in your life, define the word want, and when asked that question, it's actually very surprising when I have my clients like really just take a second and be like, what do you mean? What does that mean? And I'm like, what does it mean in your life? How do you define that? It sounds like you've worked with clients with differing forms of money dysmorphia. Like some have a distorted view of their money where they're actually doing okay, and they may feel very insecure about spending, like you talked about, like widows or divorcees who have to make this really major money shift. And so their entire view of their financial situation may not be aligned with the reality of the numbers, at least. But also some people who feel like they're very good with their money and they're okay, but it's like, wait a second, maybe we need to re-strategize here so that you don't put yourself in a hole,
Yeah, absolutely. And just coming back to that families of origin, right? Where are we socialized financially? It starts with our family of origin. And then it goes to society, and then it goes to education pretty much last, right? So where there's a big push on financial literacy, and financial literacy is super important, financial decisions are made 90% emotionally. So where do you draw on your emotions? It's that socialization. When we talk about people who are going through life changes, right, such as widowhood, divorce, adoption or loss of a child, there might be financial grief going on that they're not really aware of. And they might be grieving more than what's obvious, right? Grieving the loss of a husband, right? Of course you grieve your husband, right? That's your soulmate, the love of your life. And even if it's not, you're still grieving that relationship, but you're also grieving your identity as a spouse. You're grieving the comforting habits you might have had that aren't there anymore. The little jokes, this, that. You're grieving the ease of social groups, right? You're grieving, maybe your financial situation has changed, so you can't go to the spa that you like to get your nails done. You have to go to the plaza shop to get your nails done. People on the outside might think like, well, you're still getting your nails done. Yeah, but that was a comforting routine, right? That's part of your identity. And, working through those things like, okay, well, maybe getting the nails done isn't what's going to bring you the comfort. Maybe it's volunteering somewhere and getting the social group, feeling that you belong somewhere. Maybe it's feeling that you're getting catered to. So you go out for breakfast once a week instead of, going to the spa that might be a little bit cheaper. So it can take a lot of forms, right? With that dysmorphia. We had a woman come in and, she's sitting crying in our office because she only had $28 million left after a divorce. And
my goodness.
She's sitting with her new partner who just couldn't believe it because it was the first time that they were hearing the figure. And we just observed this like, wow, I don't think I know who this person is, because I don't think the person that I was attracted to could ever be crying about having only 28 million. But that's where it comes down to the money figure doesn't matter if the feeling is real. When I first started out in financial therapy, there was a little bit of a stigma because I work with high net worth clients. And people saying, well, you work with high net worth clients, they're going to be fine. Their problems, are going to be a little bit, petty, first world problems, that. But feelings are real, right? Feelings are real. Maybe that wealthy person inherited all their money, but if they didn't get to see their parents who were, working too much or traveling and never at the games and never here or there, then they have their own stuff that they're working through too. And they might trade it, right? Mm-hmm. Trade situations, or at least think that. So yeah, there's everybody's different, right? Everybody has a different money story, but there are no feelings that shouldn't be addressed or validated as real.
I completely agree, Ashley. It's certainly about acknowledging the human experience, the uniqueness of individual human experience that somebody can have. I hadn't thought of the term money grief in the sense that if some major shift happens, whether you grew up in poverty or whether you grew up with a lot of money and there's a major life change, sometimes the coping skills and things that you're used to enjoying, when that has to change, even in a small way, I don't think a lot of people really take the time to notice like what is going on internally, even by this tiny change of something I'm used to enjoying, something that really helped ground me in my day-to-day hustle that I have to continue to do. It's definitely really, really impactful to think about. How do these changes that you experience in your life cause moments of grief that can also build up over time? And if we don't address them, then, once there's too much buildup, a lot of us know what ends up happening.
Yeah. Absolutely. And something that I work into a lot of my presentations is forgive yourself for how you coped when you didn't know what else to do. Maybe you turned to anger. Maybe you turned to shame. Maybe you turned to impulsivity. But giving yourself the grace to understand it and the luxury to step back for a minute and slow yourself down. We are all on warp speed, Right. I don't care who you are. My colleague says all the time, there's no longer too much on our plate. There's too much on our platters. And I think that could not be more true, especially how you're talking about with your peers, that the social media, right? And media in general, there's so much information thrown at us, and not all of it is bad, but it is overwhelming, right? Like you and I, we're in this space where we're seeing new workshops and new classes and new books and biographies and opportunities and speaking engagements. That's amazing. This is all good things that are coming from media, but it's still overwhelming. And it's still making us go faster than normal. So when it comes to finance and making financial decisions, if we're emotionally flooded, whether that be good emotion or labeled bad emotion, we can't make a good decision, and we can't make a decision that we're confident in.
That makes total sense. The emotional charge that we have within us, which I'm even getting emotionally charged up because this is just resonating with me so much. I question myself and I question some of my peers, my clients. I'm like, when was the last time you just stopped to take a breath? Just take a full breath, before you're about to jump into something because you're anxious, you're overwhelmed, even if you're like super excited. I mean, even before every interview I do for this show, I always get a little bit nervous, but it brings me so much joy to be able to talk to lifelong learners as yourself, scholars as yourself. And I'm like, Jay, take a breath. It's going to go well. I'm taking this on. This is an investment in myself. This is an investment in my community. How can I take what I am emotionally charged about and use it to my advantage rather than have it be a detriment? And the mindfulness skills and techniques that it sounds like you incorporate into your business, I cannot even imagine how much it has helped Centerpoint from just like elevating beyond just wealth management and advising. I'm wondering, for people who are going through diverse life changes, over the course of a decade, our life and our values change a lot. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on a values-driven approach in regards to our financial health.
Well, first of all, doing your own work to really understand what your values are, not what you want them to be, not what you want them to appear to be to others, but what really are your values? What's really important to you, right? I mean, you might have folks saying, oh, if you're doing this, you could be doing that, and that, and making a lot more money. But if that means you're sacrificing something else that's truly important to you, that truly fills your cup, then that's not in line with your values, right? And when we say values-driven planning, that's what we're trying to get to the root of, right? What's really fulfilling for you? And again, slowing it down, that can bring it full circle. And when we talk about a values-driven approach to financial management, we want you to visualize all of the milestones from now to retirement. You Google any website, right? Any financial planning, it's from now till retirement, from now to retirement. Okay, well, first of all, retirement's not the end. It's just a new beginning. And there's about a zillion, to use a technical term, things that are going to happen between now and then that you want to accomplish, right? So what's important right now? And let's work with a professional to keep the hum of later responsibly in the background, but not sacrificing the important relationships now. The brain is a social organ. And once we acknowledge that in our relationships, and knowing that our relationships aren't only with people, but they're with money, and the way that we interact with people and money all at the same time, then that's when we can get to the core of our financial planning and the core of our values-based financial planning.
Absolutely. I'm loving this. It's almost like it's not all about financial literacy. It's about the life literacy, about your own experience, and even dimensional wealth. That's why I'm happy I told you the term that I live by, because you're delivering that. You're like, how can we be dimensionally wealthy? How can we have wealth and abundance in every single part of our lives?
And share with our communities and the people that we love, right? I mean, I love that so much. I lead a Girl Scout troop and for my daughter, and we did a whole financial empowerment couple of weeks. And be like, how are you going to do this with 5 and 7-year-olds? So here's how we're going to do it. We're going to teach mindfulness. We're going to teach accountability. We're going to teach coping. We're going to teach learning through failure. And that has nothing to do with dollars and cents, but you bet damn well it's going to have everything to do with dollars and cents when it really counts. So those are the things, and
that's a foundation.
It's the foundation. And we'll have people come to us saying, oh, how am I going to talk to my kids about money? I'm so bad with money. Okay. Limiting belief aside, you don't have to be good with money to teach your kids to be good with money, right? To start that generational transfer of positivity, right? And we say, start with the small nopes, start with the little nopes. Don't let no be the first time heard when they're teenagers. That's not going to fare well. We just had this conversation, me and my husband, I gave each of my kids a certain amount of money when we were on a weekend away. And she's like, you're going to let them buy that. They're going to have no money by Sunday. I said, and you better not give them any by Sunday, right? But learn that lesson now over a teddy bear instead of over a Tesla.
I'm very impressed by those boundaries that you put into place too. And I mean, I don't think that a lot of people struggle to do that with themselves, much less setting up your child for that. But the boundaries with yourself are obviously the first place to start, but that's a really good thing to teach of like, here's the money you have. Once it's gone, it's gone. That's it. Mm-hmm. Well, Ashley, this has been so wonderful. I have one last question for you. I'm wondering, as a financial therapy professional, as someone who works in wealth management with dimensional wealth, uplifting others, etc., what is something that you are excited to continue to contribute in the work that you do, both personally and professionally, as you elevate your message and your mission over the next several years?
Something that I'm really excited about working on is introducing modalities that folks can do on their own. Getting back to the piece of all we have is time. I would love to start to introduce, and I'm working on things in the background with exercises that individuals and families can do and bring back to a professional if and when they're ready. Because not everybody has time to sit with a financial therapist or a therapist, and not everybody has the accessibility. And that's a really, really big problem. Not everybody has $100 to $400 an hour to spend to do the work, right? And that's a really big problem because there's a lot of people in our country one bad financial decision away from being in an awful, unsafe place. So I'm really excited about, coming up with some modalities that can be given as exercises that can be truly valuable to people to start exploring these money stories and their, own self-work in the coming years. So stay tuned for that.
That's wonderful. I was just thinking, I was like, the accessibility of what that sounds like is awesome. So sign me up. I will be staying in touch with you in regards to that. Ashley, how can people stay in contact with your mission, the work you do? I know I follow you on LinkedIn, so your information will be in the show notes, but where can people go if they want to get in contact with you?
Sure. So they can find me, LinkedIn is great. Ashley Agnew, Agnew. For that, I'm at centerpointadvisors.net. You can see me there and there's a contact form and I am always looking to connect. If you're a student, I love exploratory interviews. If you're, wondering for some feedback on your journey or input or a sounding board, that I'm here and I love to connect.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Finance, Fitness, and Finesse. If you enjoyed this episode, take action and share this episode and tell your friends, you're not woke, you're broke. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Stay tuned for more episodes where we continue to build your wealth with wellness, 5 reps at a time. I'm JaeVic, and I'll see you in the next episode. Until next time, don't forget to visit jaevic.com. Be sure to keep finessing, and if you don't know, now you know. Disclaimer, this podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute financial or mental health advice. Always seek professional guidance tailored to your personal needs.